Welcome to the Greater Culture Podcast, where we have conversations about how to elevate the quality of life through movement, nutrition, recovery, and mindset practices. All right, welcome to another episode of the Greater Culture Podcast. Your host, Brad Marshall here, and today I'm joined by physical therapist Sarah Tyndall, who is part of Reform Restore PT, and I'm really excited to dive into some conversations today around how she has helped people over the last decade plus get out of pain, move better, and increase the quality of their life. So Sarah, thanks so much for spending some time on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. This is awesome.
So like I said, you are a physical therapist. You've been practicing for 16 or 17 years now. You've seen a variety of situations and have been involved in a variety of roles. Tell us a little bit about what your journey has been like, what got you into physical therapy, and some of the things you've seen and experienced over the last number of years.
So that story goes back probably 30 years at this point, to when I was a kid growing up. I grew up out in the country. I was, riding horses, riding bikes, climbing trees. And then I was in the dance studio. And I was in the dance studio pretty much from the time I could walk until I graduated high school. I danced pre-professionally with 3 companies while being a full-time high school student and engaged in every other activity I could get myself into. Yes, my parents probably thought I was crazy. So I had a few injuries along the way, thankfully all pretty minor, nothing that required surgery, but some things where I tweaked my back or I subluxed my patella. Too many ankle sprains to even count. By the time I was in high school, I wasn't even treating them anymore. I just pretty much kept dancing because there was no point. But the few times I did go to PT, I was so unsatisfied and so underwhelmed by the physical therapist I saw. I would explain to them what I was trying to do. And I still remember I was 15 when I dislocated my kneecap. And the physical therapist that I saw, after spending an hour during the first session, he ran me through a bunch of exercises that were all super easy, did nothing for me. He very undervalued my strength and ability based on my size. And at the end, he's like, well, I don't really know what to do with you. You've already surpassed all of my 6-week goals for your diagnosis. And I was like, well, what does my diagnosis matter? Like, I can't dance. That's what I want to do. And my mom's like, well, let's go back again and see. So I went back 2 more times, literally the same exact program. Nothing even changed. No challenge increase, no exercise change, nothing. And I told my mom after the 3rd time, and I was old enough to know that my parents were paying a good chunk of money based on the insurance plan we had even at that time in the 90s. And I was like, I'm not going back. This is stupid. I'm not going back. I'll just get better in dance class. And that's what I did. And I rehabbed myself in class by listening to my body, doing what I could do, and working to where I could without pain. It wasn't until I had some issues with my back and I ended up seeing an osteopath who actually pulled out the Netter anatomy book, showed me what he was working on, looked at my hip structure and my anatomy and talked me through things, that I actually realized that there were people who cared. And so I got looking at things, but at 16, med school, which is a minimum of 11 years or more versus PT school, I was like, well, 5 years sounds a lot better than 11. So, and I was like, I can always go back and do more. So that's how I ended up in PT school. And I very fortunately found a 5-year direct entry program for bachelor's masters. And I knocked it out in 5 years and hit the ground running in my early 20s.
It's always fascinating to me how people's experiences or things they go through in life lead them down a certain path. And so you're really passionate about dance and movement and how the body works, which lends itself to, hey, I want to see if I can help others in that way. What role did movement, maybe dance or even beyond dance, play in your upbringing and even then through those college years?
So for me, I guess I was probably a kid with ADHD that was underdiagnosed or not diagnosed. And I thank my parents for not following through on that. But I was always moving. You couldn't keep me still. And thankfully, I was thinking about it. I didn't have pain after dancing. I felt good. I might be a little sore if we had a hard rehearsal or, coming into Nutcracker season, 8 hours in the studio on Saturday and Sunday. I might be a little sore, but at that point I'd already built up my training throughout the season and my body was prepared for it. And aside from those few mild injuries, I didn't come home in pain. I didn't wake up in pain. I felt good. And it wasn't until my mid 20s when I was working full time as a physical therapist and didn't have time to dance anymore, didn't have time to go to the gym. I'm working at a corporate clinic, seeing probably way too many patients in a day. Thankfully, less than probably what most are seeing now. But even then, it was still too many to really do a good job. And I just would come home exhausted and tired and stop moving. And I started to be in pain all the time myself, my back, my hips, my ankles, my knees, everything just started to bother me. And so, really, at the end of the day, movement is what kept my body moving. And the more I've gotten back to moving, the better I feel. I feel amazing now as I'm knocking on the door of 40. And yes, I'm not afraid to say it. And I feel much better now than I felt in my late 20s, which is when everybody says you should be in your prime.
It really is fascinating how, you hear the adage, movement is medicine. And until it's either taken away through injury or maybe just a lifestyle, that you realize how much you actually need it, because it helps
Absolutely.
you to keep the body functioning the way it should, helps you stay pain-free. I would love to hear, when you started to transition out of dance, what did movement either look like or not look like for you? Because I think for so many folks, it's a very common story of, we grow up and maybe you're invested in different sports as a kid, maybe you play some in high school or maybe even college, and then you get out into the real world, as we say, and you're kind of like, okay, what am I supposed to do? I guess I go to the gym, I guess I work out, or maybe I join some fun classes. But for you, what did that look like, going from dancer but with structure to then, figuring out what movement looks like for you from those 20s up until now?
So in grad school, I was very fortunate to have some friends who were avid gym goers. And so we did go to the gym together, and I kind of followed along a routine with them. My school built a brand new fitness center right in time for grad school years. So we did have an aerobics yoga studio room. So we might do a class there, or might do some weights or some core work. But then when I graduated, grad school, I did get into salsa dancing, which had a lot more carryover than ballet into the real world. And I was at the time in Philadelphia. It was a very good part of my life being there for the time that I was. But I could go out any night of the week to a club and just go dance. For relatively free, relatively inexpensive, a small cover charge. I took classes for a while, but it got expensive and time consuming. So I managed to keep everything into dance for a while. And then, yes, life got busy, things got busier. It got harder to go and schedule things, or I just got tired because I couldn't stay up and dance until 1 a.m. and then get up at 5 or 6 and go to work. It's something about sleep. As I got older, I needed more of it. And so I tried different things. I tried going to the gym and doing weights. I tried running. And honestly, it bores me. No offense to everybody who loves lifting weights. I can do it and I will, and I know the value of it. But for me, it's boring. There's too much repetition in it and not enough variety. Dance class, you do a sequence, you do it once or twice. Maybe you do it on the left and then on the right, and then you're on to the next. You don't just do something over and over and over again. Except rehearsals, and that was always with the goal of perfection for performance. And so I've tried a lot of other styles and just nothing hit. So I actually was lost for quite a while in what my movement looked like. And so when I was in the city, thankfully, I walked a lot. I walked everywhere. I took public transit. I didn't drive much. And it was really moving down to North Carolina after my husband and I got married, and we moved down here, and I started an hour drive to Fort Bragg every day, that I actually really started to miss movement in my life. My footsteps went from 12 to 18,000 a day down to 6,000 a day. Just walking to my office and to the front door and back and forth with patients, with my soldiers, and then driving back home. And it wasn't until I dove back into the world of Pilates and started kind of reinvesting myself in my education through the teacher training program that I refound movement that works for me.
One of the things I really resonate with about that story is how you figured, hey, this isn't working for me. I don't appreciate it, or maybe it's boring to me. And that doesn't make it bad or whatnot, but it just gives you the opportunity to go explore something new. And I think people can get so tied to a specific methodology or a form of movement rather than looking at it as really an expression of what our body's capable of, whether that is lifting or running or dance or Pilates or yoga. figuring out what works for you, what gets you excited is going to be the best plan for movement. And I imagine, somebody who has studied the human body to figure out what it's capable of, what it's designed to do, and what it's meant to do, that probably plays a factor in, hey, I probably should stay moving and keep moving my body so that I can be healthy because I've studied it. I'm helping others to work on their own health and pain and whatnot. Talk to us a little bit about that connection of studying the human body, seeing what it's capable of, and then at the same time, trying to work with folks and help them to improve the quality of their lives.
So I think the body is amazing and resilient. And the longer I stay in this field, the more injuries I see, the more people I see, the more things I experience myself, the more I realize that our body was so perfectly designed for movement. Every aspect of it. When we look at our feet, we look at the number of bones and joints and muscles just in our feet, just in our foundation as bipedal creatures. When we look at the number of segments in the spine, and how all of those segments are connected through joints left and right, top and bottom, and move in all planes of motion. And so one of the easiest things that I use, like especially the spine, I think it's, back pain, neck pain. It's one of the most common things. The low back pain is historically the number one orthopedic or what we call musculoskeletal complaint in the medical world. And for years, we, based off a study that came out in the mid-90s, 1996. Yes, again, I have been around long enough that this was pretty fresh research when I was in school. And it was the big light bulb aha article that looked at disc pressures in different positions. And it was like sitting, bent over, holding weight on either side. The suitcase lift position is the most pressure on your discs. The second most is standing, bent over, holding weight. So this came out with the don't bend your spine when you lift, keep your spine straight, keep your spine straight. And we created a fear avoidance of bending. But when we look at the spine and we look at the segments of it and we look at how it's built, it's much more like a bike chain or an ammo chain. As I would tell to my soldiers, or a bike chain for kind of everyday people. If that chain gets rusty or kinked, it no longer feeds, it no longer flows, and everything stops working. So we can't limit motion in one area where it's designed to be without then having to load another area or literally stopping function in its tracks. And so that's kind of an example for me of a way that we can look at the design of the body and how beautifully it's designed and how just far superior to anything we can create here on Earth, as far as I'm concerned, into function and the importance of movement right there. That one analogy, I think, really describes it.
Yeah. And what's amazing is when you start to see what the potential is for what movement can look like for folks. And you mentioned, even as a coach and in lifting and in the CrossFit space, we always are very cautious of, hey, bracing the core, try and create a rigid, tension in the spine and whatnot. But you start looking at what it looks like in everyday life. I'm someone who loves to golf or play softball or, move around. You're like, your spine is constantly rotating, twisting, torquing. Like you need all of those different planes and ways for it to move to be able to enjoy the fun of going for a hike or a bike ride or something like that. So how have things maybe shifted over the years, maybe even in the way that you think about it of, okay, we've got studies that say we should maybe be more rigid or protective, but we started looking at what life actually looks like, and it doesn't look like that.
So that's actually kind of the other point of where I go with that usually when I'm talking to patients is we had this great study. We got awesome information from it, but we interpreted it and applied it incorrectly. Yes, there is pressure on the disc in certain positions, but you know what? That disc is soft and mobile for a reason. It's designed to shift, taking load when we move in different directions. When the disc stops taking the load, it has no choice but to go to bone. Bone is not capable of accommodating force the way the soft tissue structures are. They are designed to give. And so I think when we start looking at that, what I've shifted is, yes, there is a time and a place for a stable spine and movement of the limbs, whether it's the arms or the legs. There is also a time and place for a stable leg or stable arm and movement of the spine. And the body needs to be able to understand and coordinate and move between the two when necessary. So I teach Jefferson curls or some version thereof. And in the Pilates world, we have a lot of segmental or vertebrae by vertebrae, spinal movement we work on, but I also teach how to do a proper hip hinge, maintaining that stability of the spine and how to really get it through the hip, through the hamstring while engaging the abdominals. So I think that it's about understanding the in-between and the gray. My favorite answer in PT school, and still to this day, 20 years down the road, is it depends. And it's because everything is variable depending on the factors at play. And as long as you can justify the factors into a rational plan forward, then it depends. It's the world of gray, and I try to live in every shade of gray that exists and stay out of as much of the black and white as I possibly can.
As someone who has a background in psychology and counseling, I can very strongly tie to that of the amount of times you say, it depends, let's see, let's explore. And people get really frustrated by it. But when you're dealing with something as complex as the human anatomy and the way the body moves, that is sometimes the best response. And getting to know the person, what their goals are, what their aspirations are, because so many times it is to get out of pain, or I just want to get back to a level of normalcy. But you also have folks who are trying to push the bounds of what they're capable of. And if you're doing that, then you're going to need to have all the different ranges of motion and experience strength and stability in any position. So it's really fun to play within all of those lanes. I would imagine for you, most of the folks you're seeing are probably coming to you because of difficulties, challenges, pain. So talk us through, what does your process look like now when it comes to working with somebody who comes to see you? And if it is truly to get out of pain, or if there's a variety of other reasons that you're noticing as well.
So the majority of people, yes, the reason they seek care with a PT usually is pain, or the pain took them to another provider, whether it was their primary or an orthopedist or sports medicine that said, hey, go to physical therapy. So yes, usually the reason they end up in our door is pain. And I will say that right now my caseload is about a 50-50 split between dancers who are finding me because there aren't that many people who really understand the dance world and what we're trying to do. And the look on their face when somebody starts asking them questions using dance terms and very specific things, there's like this immediate sense of calm of like, okay, I can talk. Right? Like I can explain what I'm feeling. And then 50% of the everyday population, including some of the people from the CrossFit gym, people who found me through friends and family members or online. So I've kind of had a very wide gamut. And I think for me, it's starting out by saying, hey, this is where your pain is. This is what's going on, and taking a very thorough history. I have a pretty condensed but thorough online paperwork that I do ask people to complete ahead of time so I can try to review it and have some questions ready to go. I firmly believe that if you let patients talk and you ask the right questions, they will give you the majority of the information. A good clinical exam really is just to confirm what you already suspect is going on and to make sure that you are headed in the right direction. So I really take the time to get that history, ask questions, even dive into other medical history issues that may be going on, like thyroid issues or hypermobility syndromes like Ehlers-Danlos. I've seen some patients with dysautonomia, POTS, the tachycardia symptoms that happen with that. So trying to get a good history of what that was, what you used to do before, what you're trying to do now, because sometimes those aren't even the same goals. And then go through enough of an exam to find out some targeted deficits. And then I always start with simple targeted home programs like, hey, let's look at this particular motion, this particular joint, this area, and let's just start here. Let's see how you respond to some simple, basic, isolated work. The brain controls everything in the body. And I very firmly believe that if your brain can't find a particular muscle, if it can't communicate with that muscle and tell it when to turn on and when to turn off, if it can't release to allow full motion at a joint or engage to stiffen up that joint, whatever needs to happen there, if that communication is lacking, the compound movements you'll be able to do for a while until eventually that system breaks down. So I start with those simple things and say, let's drive communication. Let's drive that understanding between your brain and your body, get them on the same page, get them communicating so that then we can advance it up into a higher level. I do use manual techniques that are, when appropriate, joint mobilizations or some manipulations. I do scraping and cupping. I have very wicked thumbs. God granted me thumbs that are basically little daggers. My soldiers preferred needles to my thumbs. That tells you, if that tells you anything. So I do use my hands. I do use manual techniques, but only as a bridge. If I need to facilitate getting somebody to that point, at the end of the day, it's about understanding how your body moves. One of the things that I do have on my website and that I have quoted to patients often is there are 168 hours in the week. If you come see me for 1 hour, that leaves you with 167 on your own. That 167 makes a bigger difference than the 1 hour we spend together. So how can they apply things that I've taught them? How can they start to integrate it into daily life? Whether it's, hey, I'm getting up from a chair, let me do 10 extra times because I've just now done 10 squats and I can move on with things, or starting to get their feet moving first thing in the morning, spending more time barefoot, whatever it is that they need to do. Start with simple things. Make sure they understand the value of that compliance and that, kind of repetition, and then move into whatever the higher level stuff that they want to do is.
Yeah, one of the things I really appreciate about that approach is, one, when folks are coming to you, it's like, okay, let's identify what the pain point is and what's causing it so we can identify the path forward of whether that looks like, some different mobilizations or scraping, cupping, etc. But really the main big goal here is to figure out what systems in the body aren't communicating well and how do we get them back online and get you into a lifestyle that will hopefully prevent this from happening in the future. Because I've certainly seen that as well, where you can compensate and you can gut your way through some things, but sooner or later, one of those systems is going to break down, where a muscle gets overloaded, or, certain structures are taxed a little bit more than they'd like to be. And that's when we get those flare-ups of those acute things that in the moment feels like it was just I just bent over to pick something off the floor and my back seized up. And it's like, well, that was probably weeks and months or years building up to that one moment. Yep. So working through it from a preventative perspective can be helpful. And I know in my world that can be really challenging. It's one of the reasons we encourage folks to add movement, exercise, because we're trying to be preventative of keeping you from some of those things happening. What's been your experience with that? Because when people come to see you for pain, they want to get back to normalcy. But if we can work on teaching them and educating them that, hey, if there's things we do in our daily lives that'll hopefully prevent this from happening, or hopefully make it where you don't have to come back and see me. What are those conversations like with your patients, or what have you seen in that regard of trying to be preventative or proactive rather than reactive to the pain that they get?
So I think a lot of it is also understanding that pain doesn't always have to equal injury or dysfunction. They are not always together. Like just the other day, I was teaching in Pilates. I got up off the floor weird. I felt a pop in my knee, a kind of immediate onset of some pain kind of deep in the joint and to the front. But I was able to fully bend it, fully straighten it, walk across the room, fully weight bear on it. And I was like, okay. My client was like, are you okay? I'm like, yep, I'll be fine. She's like, okay. She's like, well, you're the PT. So if you think you're okay, then let's go. And by the end of the session, everything was completely fine. It didn't swell up. There was no other injury. It was just something rotated. And my years of dance, probably more than likely, I have some lovely old meniscus wear and tear in there. And I probably had a shift, but my quick check said, hey, everything's good to go. I'm going to keep moving it. I'm going to keep doing things. I'm going to, not twist it right off the bat for the first couple of minutes until this immediate pain settles down. And then I checked rotation and it was fine. And I said, okay, let's go. So I think a lot of it is that, and having people understand that if there is that moment of pain, let's do a check-in. Let's understand what was the mechanism. Was it a significant enough thing that happened to warrant a step back and a real check-in? But me getting up off the floor, I'm sorry, I'm not that heavy. I'm not that big of a person. If I can do serious damage to my knee getting up off the floor, then I have not prepared my body for daily life. And so understanding that there are going to be pops, there are going to be pains, there are going to be some moments that these things happen. It's okay to take a few minutes pause, let the dust settle. But if it clears and you have no other restrictions, it's okay to continue moving forward. And so I think just learning to read the signals that the body is giving us, and learning to read what's more serious and what, calls for immediate attention versus what calls for a little bit of TLC. Sometimes it's like, hey, when that pain comes, that exercise that you always feel better. Maybe if you can take 5 minutes and just do that drill and see if it calms it down. And if it does, then hey, great, keep going with life, keep doing things. If it doesn't, shoot me a text, call me, let me know what's going on. And giving them that confidence that they don't have to be so afraid. We are fostered in our medical world a fear avoidance. We have fostered this sense of avoiding things that cause pain. How many doctors have said, don't go, well, if that hurts, don't do it. Okay, that might be a short-term answer, but that cannot be a long-term answer to just stop doing things and stop living. And so I think from that standpoint, trying to reverse that psychology of the fear avoidance and get people to more understand that, yes, there are times when we have to take that step back. We have to get something checked. We have to do, kind of follow through. And there are times when it's just the body, having a little shift and having a little moment. And then just like you had a cranky day because maybe you got an hour less sleep than you should have, but by the next day you're good to go. We're going to have those moments.
Yeah, something that resonated with me is this idea of pain does not equal injury, and learning more about that and coming to terms out of, okay, if something snap, crackles, or pops or whatnot, people immediately have like this like, oh no moment of like, I better call somebody and check in. And I've come to realize with speaking to a lot of physical therapists and practitioners over the years, like, hey, those are normal. They're okay. Mm-hmm. Check in with yourself. And I think helping people become the expert on themselves is really the goal for a lot of us in this profession of like, it's okay to check in with yourself in the morning. How are things feeling? Just because something feels tight or maybe has a little bit of a sensation that you're not really too thrilled about doesn't mean that the world's going to end. It means we got to be skillful in how we think about that. Or there's things we can do to massage or activate or kind of warm up some of those things, and they'll usually take care of themselves. But like you said, taking a moment, pause, check in with yourself, see if it's okay, and then proceeding forward. And if it does feel like it's nagging you over hours or days, okay, maybe now I want to have someone check in. And you're someone who, you said you've had a variety of roles in the physical therapy world, from corporate to military to now operating in a cash-based system. Tell us a little bit about what that journey has looked like and what that means in terms of care for patients and folks you get a chance to work with, since you've seen so many different situations and folks over the years.
So coming out of PT school, my first job was in an inpatient hospital. And although it wasn't a good fit and I did not stay there long, I learned a lot of perspective about severity of injuries and involvements from the things I saw. It was a level 1 trauma hospital in North Philly. So there were some interesting things to be seen. And I moved into the outpatient orthopedic world, and I started seeing dancers and seeing a lot of foot and ankle in the practice that I was in. And even though it was a corporate practice, our clinic had a very unique niche with those two things. And so we were able to kind of run things our own way. But that said, because of the way insurances work and reimbursements and things like that, it's really hard to keep a clinic open and provide one-on-one care in an insurance model as a physical therapist. Some other fields, it's easier to do than others, but as a PT. And so over 10 years time of being really at that same clinic, I went from being a staff PT to managing that clinic and actually getting to see the financials come in, getting to see what the reimbursements look like, getting to see what our contracts with the different insurance companies look like. And I literally watched our dollars coming in every year go down and our dollars going out every year go up. New grads are expecting more money because they're coming out with more money in loans. So they're expecting higher salaries. Then experienced clinicians want to have a higher salary than a new grad. Okay, I understand that as well. And then the front desk wants to have a higher amount of money. And so even just in salaries and benefits alone, that money was going out, but then that's equipment costs. Everything's digital. So there's cost with that. Rent was going up. Electric was going up, all of those things. And then I'm watching the insurance reimbursements go down and down. And I was like, this isn't okay. We're having to double and triple. I had mornings where I would start at 7 o'clock or 7:30 on my own. And the physicians that were on site were their team was there. But from what I did, we were a separate clinic. I was by myself. And I would see 2 people at 7:30, 2 people at 8, 2 people at 8:30, a person at 9, and an eval at 9:30. By myself, no aides, no assistants. My front desk started at 8:30, so my first couple people I was checking in and out myself while doing all that. And while I still did my best to provide good care, I also knew that that wasn't really the best care, but it was the best I could do. And I gave myself credit for doing the best I could do in this scenario, and people mostly still got better. And then moving into the military medicine, I was super excited to have the opportunity to be one-on-one. I was very excited for the autonomous provider situation of being able to order my own images, my own labs, and having rights really to use my degree and use my education to its fullest capacity. And the challenge I ran into there is because it's not a paid system in the sense of, our soldiers are paid during the time that they're at physical therapy. They're not taking time off work, out of work, or out of a leave bank to come see us. They don't have a copay or co-insurance or anything like that. Now we have all of the minute aches and pains mixed in with all of the severe injuries. And now all of a sudden, I'm seeing people one-on-one for 5 issues at a time in a 45-minute new patient slot or a half-hour follow-up slot. And my follow-ups are 4 to 5 weeks out. And we don't have enough PTAs to help out, although we had an amazing team of PTAs. I will say that they were phenomenal, but we don't have enough to help out. So maybe if you really need extra help, you get to come in once a week for an extra half hour. And it's really put the onus back on my soldiers and me changing how I treated to educate them more and more on what they could do on their own, what they could do when they weren't there. And also looking at my soldiers and the need to be able to deploy, be able to go to training without really any medical backup and say, hey, what can you do on your own to take care of yourself when you can't see me? And so that's helped to evolve that care. But I also saw the downsides of people with a lot going on and just not having the time to really take care of them the way they deserved, the way they needed. And a system that I exhausted myself fighting because my soldiers got every moment of the time that they had with me, and my computer sat and waited. And then every night I had to catch back up on all the other stuff. And I did that in the civilian world too. So that is kind of my way of doing things. And I just knew, God put in my heart back probably somewhere between 2013 and 2016, this idea when I had a couple colleagues go out on their own of like, hey, maybe someday I'll get to do that. Maybe someday I'll be able to just treat people for what they need to be treated for and do the right thing. And so I think with everything that happened with COVID and the vaccine mandates and just all the things that started to change within the medical and healthcare world through those couple of years, it really got me thinking again and kind of forced me to reevaluate. And I think God kind of gave me a swift kick in the rear end that it was finally time to make a jump. And so then that's kind of where Restore and Reform kind of came to light. And the idea that at the end of the day, the person in front of me is who I'm treating, not a computer, not a time clock, not a system that's broken that I'm fighting just to try and, keep my head above water, but just the person in front of me.
Yeah, it's amazing how when folks are looking for care, if it's prescribed more or less from a doctor, they're going to see somebody associated with that. Or if they're lucky enough within their profession to have access to it, you're going to get a level of care where on the other end, the practitioner is doing the absolute best they can with the time constraints and everything else to give the highest level of care. I think what we're seeing is to have a thorough evaluation and have somebody work with you who can provide a level of care that's going to meet and exceed, what you might expect. We're starting to see that more and more in the cash-based system, and going from, 2 people over 30 minutes to 1 at 30 minutes. And now I have 45 minutes to an hour to really figure this thing out, get me educated, get me the tools I need to move forward and try and work towards a higher quality of life. It's starting to make more and more sense for those that are interested in that level of care to pursue cash-based services and find a practitioner who aligns with, the things that you're working on or the things that you want to get better and move forward from there. And one of the things I know you mentioned being in the dance world in terms of passions for you is someone who's very interested in feet and ankles and the lower body, knowing the pain that dancers put on them. But if I were to pick a body part that seems like it's having a little bit of a glow up right now in the physical fitness world, it seems to be the feet. And more folks are putting emphasis on the feet, whether it's toe spacers, walking barefoot, getting grounded, all these different things you're hearing about. Hey, we got to take care of our feet, get wider shoes, this and that. Talk to us a little bit about your passion and what you've come to know and understand about the lower part of our body that probably gets neglected more than it should, but can be very, very pivotal in how the rest of the system works.
So that's another area that I feel like I have continued to evolve in as a provider. I was very fortunate when I was in Philly to work with pen, foot, and ankle surgeons, just some absolutely fantastic brains, brilliant minds, wonderful orthopedists. And I learned a lot about the mechanics and the anatomy, just way deeper in a thought process than I ever did in school. And that's not to knock my ortho instructors in school. They were actually some of the top in Philly at the time. So, and things that I learned from them, I still use 20 years later that are still valid. And so it was a different mindset and a different viewpoint. And then what I've learned is that some of the recommendations we were making, I think were good for in the moment for those people, like shoes with anti-roll or anti-twist, or shoes that maybe had a little bit more structure and support if you had a painful flat-footed or pronated foot type. The challenge, though, is that what I've seen in my own life and in my soldiers particularly, who went from having very lightweight boots to these big, bulky, heavy, rigid boots. And what I started seeing there is that things were just not improving. No matter what exercises I was giving, we just weren't making the same progress. And then I started experiencing more and more ankle pain as I was moving less, doing less. My old ankle sprains kind of came back to haunt me, if you will. And I started diving back into things, and I, really reevaluated it and looking. There is so much value in the sensory feedback of our feet. We've been taught that not feeling things is normal. It's just like using ice to numb pain or something topical or taking medications. But numb is not normal, whether it's medication or ice or shoe wear. You need to feel. Our bodies are designed to feel. That's how our brain gets feedback about where we are, what we're doing, what we need to change, what we need to keep doing. Our brain, without that feedback, is just flying completely blind. It has no information to make decisions on. And so getting to a point where going back to my root as a dancer and as a kid who grew up out in the country, I literally used to walk tar and chip roads barefoot as a kid. My parents thought I had shoes on. I wore them to get out of the house and then kick them off in the yard. I really only wore them in the woods, and that was because there were probably very not good things like snakes and stuff like that could have done damage. But other than that, I didn't really wear shoes much as a kid. And in dance, our shoes don't have any structure or support. Even point shoes that people think are so rigid and hard, they can be, but the box is really basically paper mache, essentially. It's layers of canvas and glue. So over time with sweat and with use, that breaks down and softens. The shanks, the rigid part in the back, again, breaks down over time. And so you need to have the strength to be able to generate that support on your toes. And so going back to my foundation, which was my feet did everything for me, I've actually watched some of my back pain melt away. I've watched some of my ankle pain melt away. I've watched some of that feel better, understanding the toe mobility and going into that. So I think there is something very valid in understanding that our feet do need to be able to pronate and soften, but they also need to be able to become rigid and raise up. The toes change when that happens. The heel position changes when that happens. The shin position changes when that happens. So there's a lot of mobility that has to happen there. And I think the majority of us have underutilized our feet because I know for my generation, a lot of it, and most of the kids now, they were put in shoes before they could walk. And they were put in hard, fancy, pretty looking shoes before they could walk that were cute for pictures. And so we've literally started shaping their feet. But when you look at a child's foot and the fact that the bones aren't formed, you cannot be born with bunions. all children have triangle shaped feet. And what we know from engineering is triangles are the most stable structure that exists. And again, you go back to the beautiful design of the body. We were designed with 2 triangles as our stable base. And so when we start taking that away, through different training, different activities, is shoe wear alone all of it? No. Is toe spacers alone? I didn't used to recommend toe spacers because I was like, they're not going to do anything. And that's because then you're putting your feet back into a narrow shoe, or you're not strengthening the muscles. Now I do wear toe spacers, usually a little bit every night if I remember to put them in. Sometimes I wear them in my shoes during the day for part of the day. But it's as a component of a multifactorial approach. Getting into healthier natural shoe wear, getting the muscles, working on the strength of those muscles, working on mobility in areas where maybe I'm a little bit tighter or somebody's a little bit more restricted. And then that literally shifts everything up the chain all the way to the position of our pelvis and our lower back.
Yeah, one of the things that I've come to realize is how important the feet are for all of those things of our ankles and our calves and our knees and our hips to feel better. The way that our feet are making contact with the floor, the way that we're using the musculature within them will impact that. And so I think that brings a lot of questions for folks if they're, the shoe companies have ads designed to get folks into their specific shoes. Yep. And in the CrossFit space, there's no shortage of options for shoes. Most of them are, what they would call a minimal drop or a very flat type of shoe. And that's the goal being, hey, can we run, jump, push off the floor with those and keeps our foot working hard. We also know there's running shoes, which are going to put your foot in that elevated position with a whole bunch of cushion in them, and then everything in between. When it comes to shoes, is there things or best practices that you've come to know? Because I think when you look around, you see most folks are in some kind of a running shoe because it has a ton of cushion. It feels like you're walking on a cloud. It's supposed to be very comfortable for you. So what have you come to know or understand about shoe wear and how folks can potentially help themselves out when it comes to their feet?
So this is, Born to Run came out in the mid 2000s looking at a native population of people, I think in Central America, and who had never worn shoes and lived life barefoot and looked at function. And so then everybody started trying to do the barefoot thing. The Vibram 5 Fingers came out and a couple other barefoot shoes. And then everybody ended up with stress fractures and shin splints and other issues. And so then here comes along the cushion shoe world. There's one by name and I won't go there, but that kind of started the high cushion trend of, see, barefoot's bad for you. You need cushion, you need support. And because retail is exactly that, a shoe company's job is to make and sell shoes. Once the market is trending in a direction, every brand is going to trend in that direction typically, right? They're going to follow the money. So one of the things that we use is we call it the 5 Fs. Really it's 4, but there is a 5th one. And I'm sorry, I'm having some headphone issues at the moment. But we look for foot shaped, and that is the number one thing. If it's not shaped like a foot, if it's shaped like Buddy the Elf's shoe, it's probably not shaped like your foot. So foot shaped, flat, and flat is going to be that amount of drop. Do you have to be at a complete 0 drop? No, but you want to be as low as is comfortable for you. Flexible, because again, your foot needs that mobility to be able to move. Okay. And then feel. Can you feel the ground? If you cannot feel the 3 points of your triangle, which is the ball of your big toe, the ball of your little toe, and the center of your heel, then your brain can't find where you are in space. So does it have to be completely barefoot? No. In fact, I encourage that most people probably won't make it to a complete barefoot shoe, depending on what you do for life. If you stand on concrete all day, you probably are going to want a little something. But you want to go with as little as you can get away with. The other thing that's happened in a lot of running shoes are what's called the toe spring, or that lift up in the front, which is designed to make your push off more ergonomic. But if the shoe is doing the push off for you, your muscles are not. Same thing with the arch support. That flatness is not just the drop, but it's also the amount of arch support. So again, if the shoe is pushing your arch into place, A, we're never allowing it to give when it needs to. So we're restricting a natural motion, but B, the muscles aren't then learning to lift it when they need to. So we're taking away the body's natural function. So there are a couple things. There are several brands out there. My patients actually get a whole list of brands that cover different styles of shoes. If you like Chucks and Vans, if you run running sneakers, if you like ballet flats or dress shoes for men, combat boots for my soldiers. I literally had like an entire list. I think it's down to like a 10-point font to fit it onto one page that I will email out to my patients that are coming to me for lower extremity related issues that have some different brands. One brand that I like a lot and I do recommend a lot, I'm actually wearing today. So I pulled the shoe off while we're talking. And I am an affiliate for them. So it's Lems. And so this is their Primal 2, which is really one of their lightest shoes. And I actually have the insole out because the removable insole is too much cushion for me. So I actually have it out. This is a 9mm stack height. So the distance off the ground is 9mm and it's a 0 drop. So it's the same stack from the front to the back. You can see there's very little spring or very little lift here. Fully flexible to be able to do what I need it to do. The fifth F that I didn't cover is fixed, which is important for things like sandals, Crocs. Crocs are not on my no-no list. They're not my top of my list, but they're doable. I actually have a post coming soon on those. But if you're going to wear them, put them in sport mode so that they're at least fixed to your foot. So you don't have to do the weird little toe grippy thing to try to hold them on. So sandals, flip-flops, things like that, make sure they're fixed, that they're going to stay on your foot. So like I love Lems, and they have a couple models that are a little bit higher. They have great boots for outdoors, for hiking and things like that. And I love Lems for a lot of just kind of people who like being active. As far as that, meeting those demands, the ones that I got my husband, the Primal Pursuit, are a 14mm stack height, so a little bit thicker, but with one hand, I can still fold them over. So even though they have a little more cushion, they have a little bit more quote unquote support for him, they still have enough mobility for him to do what he needs to do. And you can see that that foot shape is really nice in comparison. I can actually wear my toe spacers in here if I wish, and I'm not blowing out the sides.
That's a big plus. I was going to say, I know most of the shoes in the athletic world, if you were to try and put toe spacers on and fit them in there, not the most comfortable situation. Nope. And at least in the CrossFit space, that's one of the top questions I feel like people ask is, what's the toe box like? Can my foot splay and spread, or do I need a wider toe box, or do I have a more narrow foot? And I'm sure a lot of that is the conditioning that our foot has gone through over time to potentially, you know, if you want to say shrink it, but like kind of push it together versus allowing that splay. And things seem to be trending in the direction that you just highlighted, that wider toe boxes, allowing the foot to splay a little bit more, creating more opportunity for the foot to build some strength and to build some resiliency by being in contact with the ground and taking, I'd say, some of the support from the shoe away, because we want the foot to do a little bit of work there. So I'm actually very interested to see what that list looks like, because I know folks have shoes for all different scenarios. Like you said, if I'm going lifting or working out in the gym, if I'm going for a hike, if I'm working on my feet all day, there's probably different ones we can leverage that are going to do the job we need, and as well help us to make sure we're taking care of that foot, because we know how important the foot can be in regards to everything feeling better. You talk to somebody who's on their feet all day and they've got low back pain, it's probably a good indication there's something going on there on the lower half that's impacting that lower back.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, transitioning shoes, if you've been in a normal sneaker, please don't think that I just suddenly jumped into these with the soles out. Again, my background has been as a very barefoot, very foot intrinsic person. But even for me, I had to slowly reintegrate back into a more barefoot style shoe when I hadn't been in them for a while. So keep that in mind also, that idea of shifting anything too quickly. It needs to be a gradual process, just like in the gym when you're training and you're coaching your members that come in who want to go all in. You're like, okay, hold on, let's dial it back a little bit. Let's go slow. Let's start with the foundations and let's build on that, and we'll get you where you want to be.
Yeah, I love
And so
that.
just keep
So
that in mind with shoes too. Like that's the
yeah,
same idea.
I love it. Making that smooth transition, testing out new
Hmm.
shoes, seeing what it feels like, and then making the decisions from there. And one of the
Absolutely.
things, we're really passionate about, and I know you are too, is overall just how do we help people improve the quality of their life? It's probably a big reason why you got into this field and have been in it for so long, an intrinsic motivation to learn more about the body and injury, and then over the years help people out. We're always big on how do we help improve the quality of people's lives. So around this concept of this idea of quality of life, how do you think about that, or how do you conceptualize that, given all the experiences you've had and kind of where you find yourself in life today?
I think quality of life is the ability to do what you need to do and what you want to do with relatively little second thought and relatively little discomfort. That said, we're all going to have pain here and there. I have yet to figure out how to stop having pain. And if I haven't figured it out on myself, I'm sorry, but that means I probably don't have the secret for you. There is no magic fix to that, but it's the being able to get up and go do the things. So if your job, if your profession is a labor based profession where you're on your feet all day, um, like I've seen plenty of contractors, I've seen plenty of mechanics along the way. Obviously, my soldiers had very physically demanding jobs for a lot of them. Or whether you sit in an office all day and you're not moving enough, right? There is a balance in that. So it's being able, maybe you're a mom with multiple kids, or maybe you're a single dad for whatever reason, and you're trying to navigate a job and the kids. Like there are certain things that your life will demand you to need to be able to do. And then at the end of the day, there are certain things that as a human being are the interests that you have that you want to be able to do. Now, I can't make more time in a day. So that part I can't help you with again as well. But my goal is to give you the strategies of understanding your body, understanding the movements that are required, training your body to have those movements to be able to do things. If you have a crib and you have a baby in a crib, especially once you lower that mattress down, once they start being able to stand up and start to climb a little bit, and you need to lower that mattress down, you cannot keep your spine straight and get a baby in and out of a crib or in and out of a car seat. So me training you to do straight back activities probably isn't going to offer you a whole lot in that, if that's what your life demands. So I think quality of life is the ability to do the things you need to do and that you want to do with relatively little modifications or things. Now, if something's not enjoyable to you anymore, it's okay to give it up. But if it's something you enjoy and want to be able to do, I want to find some way that it can be a part of your life, even if it has to be modified somewhat. Maybe running long distances isn't working for your body for whatever reason. Maybe you do have some really bad arthritis and we're trying to preserve that joint for as long as we can. But if you want to run, let's make sure you can run. Maybe not go running a marathon, but maybe you can go for 2 miles and still get that benefit and feel good from it. So I want you to be able to do those things for your life, and be able to enjoy it.
Yeah, I think that's so important to know that, hey, these are the necessities that just to have the basic quality of life that I'm hoping for, I got to be able to accomplish these tasks. And most of them
Mm-hmm.
are, if you want to use the term rudimentary, but like I got to be able to sit and I got to be able to stand. I got to be able to get up or get on the floor, get up off the floor, pick up my kids,
Yep.
carry things from here to there. If I can get those things done, great. But we also know if we really want to enjoy the quality of our life, there's a lot of things we want to do. We want to go for that run, sign up for that 5K or Spartan race with friends, or go golfing or play in a recreational sport because it's fun, it's social, and it helps add a little bit of happiness to our life. So we want to be able to
Mm-hmm.
take advantage of those things. And we know the body is designed and built to move. It's going to allow us to do that to a certain extent. And we know that there's things like pain and injury that can get in the way from time to time. And when those things pop up, having somebody like Sarah at your call who you can reference and go to get you back to doing all those things you want, improve the quality of your life, that's really what it's all about, and helping people to overcome the challenges so that they can get back to having a lot of fun and enjoying the opportunities that they get.
Yeah, I think whether it's me or somebody else, having that person that you can kind of go to, even if it's just a starting point, I've definitely referred out when necessary if it's not appropriate for me to treat. So having that person that you trust to give you an honest answer and help you get back to things. And PT really is a good way to go. We're trained to do things on a least invasive manner possible and not jump straight to the nuclear options on things. So find yourself a good PT, whether it's me or whether it's somebody else local. Just try to find that person that you've got in your back pocket.
Yeah. And so, Sarah, you're somebody who's local to the Holly Springs area here in North Carolina. So tell folks where they can link up with you, where they can find you, and how they can get in touch with you if they're interested to work with you or learn a little bit more about how you might be able to help them.
Okay, so I am on social media. Not my favorite place in the world, but I am there as a part of the business needs and just kind of getting out to people. So restore.reform.pt on Facebook and Instagram. So feel free to follow me there and kind of keep up with things. I try to post some fun stuff, but also some real, helpful information for people. You can get to my website through there as well. You can find me through Google. Yahoo, any of your major search engines, I'm available. So you can just search Restore and Reform Holly Springs. I should pop up. And so I have a lot of information on my website. I have a lot of affiliates locally in Holly Springs if you're in the area. If you know where Bombshell Brewery is, which if you live in Holly Springs and don't know, you need to find them. Even if you don't drink, they have food trucks, they have events, they've got tons of cool stuff going on. It's a really cool group over there. But if you make it to Bombshell and you turn around, CrossFit HSP 919 Spine and myself, Restore and Reform, are right across the street. So I'm located inside of that space. I have an office here with 919 Spine that I work out of, and then I have full access to the gym. So if your goal is to get back to any level of conditioning, or maybe it's CrossFit, or even for my dancers, I have taken them out there and made them use the sled and taught them that weights are not something to be afraid of. So I can absolutely get you out into the gym and get you moving. So we've got kind of a nice option here where we're kind of built in-house, trying to really help people get back to moving at the end of the day.
I highly encourage you to give Sarah and Restore Reform a follow on social. Reach out with any challenges or things that you're working through, or even if you feel good but you still want to get checked out or learn a little bit more about how your body can move in an even more effective and efficient way, recommend reaching out, setting up an appointment with her. Well, Sarah, thanks so much for spending some time with us on the podcast today, sharing some of your passion and insights around physical therapy and the body and how folks can move in a way that's pain-free and get them closer to doing all the things they need and all the things they want.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the time, Brad. It's been awesome.